And to get more on the significance of the discussions going on in Singapore, we're joined by Qinduo Xu. He is professor at Renmin University of China. He's also a senior researcher at the Pangoal Institution, focusing on China's foreign policy. Thanks very much for joining us on this morning in Beijing.
Good morning, Sean.
There's no doubt that the dialogue in Singapore is taking place with the backdrop of heightened U.S. tensions and U.S. China tensions over trade and security. What do you expect to hear from Chinese officials today?
Well, I think the Chinese general is going to talk about mostly, the military, the defense policy, especially in the South China Sea area, and in terms of the Taiwan issue over there. Of course, against the backdrop of China-U.S. relationship. And I think, the Chinese side realizes this is an important platform for China to share, what it is pursuing, what it is a goal, and what are the principles it follows, especially when it comes to the military affairs. Because China's military has developed very fast over the past years, so there is a demand from outside players, to understand what's going on. I think that's a good chance, at least for exchange.
I think that phrase, important platform, it really hits the nail on the head. And the U.S. was blunt in its assessment, labeling Chinese activity in the South China Sea as, quote, excessive. China, meanwhile, has long maintained the islands in the area in question are part of China, and says any heightened tension comes from U.S. military carrying out drills in an area far from its home. Will we hear a direct rebuttal, do you think?
Yes, if you listen to carefully the speech made by the U.S. Defense Secretary Shanahan, most of the accusations, on the Chinese side is not really something new. It has been there for a long time. But when it comes to the Chinese position on the South China Sea, the official position is those islands and the surrounding waters. I think there's important clarification to be made. That is, China does not claim the entire South China Sea. That's often misrepresented in some of the media. And also, if you compare the Beijing's position with that position of Taiwan, it's actually the same. So it's I would say inheritance of the previous government before 1949. For example, the 9-dash line, previously known as the 11-dash line, were actually drawn by the nationalist government in 1947. So, and then the communist government, when it's founded in 1949, it just inherited that stance. So it has been the same until today.
Let's take a look at the makeup of who is at this dialogue. What do you make of the fact that the U.S. once again sent a top Pentagon official, as it has done for years? But this is the first time in 8 years China's defense minister is attending the Shangri La Dialogue.
A good point. Previously, even today, if you look at the Shangri La Dialogue, for some of the panel, you would see half of the speakers are actually from European nations. You would wonder, this is Asia security. What has that to do with, European nations? Of course, it has something to do with them, but I would say not directly concerned with the European nations. And so in the past, the Chinese side would say, hey, that is a forum for the Western nations to beat China, to basically slam China for whatever activities. So what's the point of going there, being criticized or being attacked in that forum? But gradually people say, hey, we should make a good use of this opportunity to share, what's the real policy with the other side.
Indeed. We've talked a lot about how the two sides are, in essence, butting heads at this point. But if there was a hint of positive news in the discussions, China welcoming the fact that the United States says there is, of course, competition between the two largest economies on Earth, but competition doesn't have to meet conflict. How can all sides build on that statement?
Yeah, I think for the Chinese side, people see that as a very positive tone presented by the U.S. delegation. That is, for example, Defense Secretary Shanahan said that, there is no face-off between U.S. and China. U.S. is not seeking confrontation with China. That's very positive. Of course, there are problems that two sides need to solve. I think ultimately it's really about the rise of China, the U.S. side trying to balance the rise of China, or sometimes people use the term to contain the rise of China. And then the U.S. needs the support of the regional countries, for example, Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, etc. And then, of course, there was some tough rhetoric from the U.S. speech. For example, the regional countries should imitate the United States, viewing economic security as part of their overall security in dealing with China, etc. But I'm not sure that will be well received by the regional countries. Look, China is the largest trading partner of the regional, basically all of Asian countries here, and I don't think the countries will risk their economic interests for the sake of the disputes in the South China Sea. Besides, if you look at the past couple of years, South China Sea has been calm, and China and Southeast Asian countries have been able to cooperate and maintain peace and security. Yes, the problem is not being resolved. I would say is being resolved, is not resolved yet, but maintaining peace and stability itself could be the goal.
An important few hours coming ahead with the Shangri La Dialogue, as well as China's all-important white paper coming out on the trade relations as well. Qinduo Xu, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your insight.